February 3, 1945, American forces enter Manila. General Douglas MacArthur declares the city liberated within days. He is wrong by almost a month and wrong by 100,000 lives. What happens between the American entry on February 3rd and the official end of the battle on March 3rd is one of the most catastrophic urban battles in the history of the Second World War. It is also one of the least known outside the Philippines. Stay with me, because this story does not begin in February 1945. It begins with a city. Drop a comment right now and tell me which battle of the Second World War you think is the most underreported in popular history. And stay with me, because what this city was before February 1945 is essential to understanding what was lost in it. Manila in 1941 was called the Pearl of the Orient, not as a marketing slogan, as a genuine description of one of the most beautiful and sophisticated cities in Asia. The Spanish had built it over 3 centuries into a city of extraordinary architecture, of walled colonial grandeur, of boulevards and churches and institutions that made it a cultural and commercial center for the entire region. The Americans added Art Deco buildings that rivaled anything in San Francisco, a waterfront promenade along Manila Bay, universities, libraries, a city that sat at the intersection of Asian and Western culture and had made something remarkable from that intersection. Then the Japanese came in December 1941. The Japanese occupation of Manila from 1942 to 1945 was brutal. The civilian population suffered under a regime that used the city as a logistics hub and treated Filipino civilians with a contempt the historical record documents in detail. By 1944, the war was turning against Japan, and the Filipino resistance operating in the jungle outside the city was increasing its pressure. In October 1944, MacArthur fulfilled his famous promise. He returned to the Philippines. By February 1945, American forces were at the outskirts of Manila. General Tomoyuki Yamashita, the Japanese commander in the Philippines, had declared Manila an open city. He intended to withdraw his forces and avoid the destruction of the city in the fighting that was coming. Rear Admiral Sanji Iwabuchi did not follow those orders. Iwabuchi commanded approximately 17,000 Japanese naval forces in Manila. He decided to defend the city street by street, building by building, block by block. He ordered his forces to use the civilian population as cover and to destroy the city's infrastructure as they were pushed back. What followed across the next 29 days was one of the most horrific episodes of the entire Pacific War. Hit subscribe right now, because this is the kind of history this channel covers every week. The full story, the parts that most documentary series leave out. The Americans pushed into the city from the north, but south of the Pasig River was a different battle entirely. The Japanese had fortified every major building: the Manila Hotel, the Finance Building, the Legislative Building. Every stone building in Intramuros had been turned into a fortified position. 17,000 Japanese defenders had decided to die in those buildings and take as much of the city with them as they could. The Americans used artillery. The decision to use artillery in a city of 1 million civilians was debated at the command level, but the alternative, sending American infantry building by building against fortified positions, would cost American lives that the command was not willing to absorb. The artillery was authorized. What the artillery did to Manila over the next 3 weeks is difficult to describe in terms that do justice to the scale of the destruction. Building by building, the city south of the Pasig River was reduced to rubble. The Intramuros, the walled city the Spanish built over 3 centuries, was destroyed in days of continuous artillery fire that left almost nothing standing inside its walls.
And inside those buildings, inside those walls, were tens of thousands of Filipino civilians who had taken shelter there or been forced there by Japanese forces, using them as shields. The civilian death toll of the Battle of Manila is estimated at 100,000 people in 29 days in one city. To put that number in context, more Filipino civilians died in the Battle of Manila than American military personnel died in the entire Pacific War. That number does not appear in most popular histories of the Pacific War. Now, here is the part most documentary treatments do not spend enough time on. Before the American artillery destroyed the Japanese positions, the Japanese forces committed massacres throughout the civilian population of Manila. The Bayview Hotel Massacre, the German Club Massacre, the Paco Massacre, the massacres inside Intramuros. Japanese forces moved through the civilian population, killing men, women, and children in acts that post-war tribunals documented and prosecuted as war crimes. The scale of these atrocities places the Battle of Manila alongside the Rape of Nanking in the history of Japanese war crimes in the Second World War. It is less known internationally because the narrative of Manila was rapidly absorbed into the larger story of Pacific War liberation. The survivors knew. The Filipino people knew. The memory of those 29 days is carried in Philippine national consciousness in a way that the international community has never fully understood. After the battle, Manila was described by American journalists as resembling Warsaw after its destruction, the second most destroyed Allied capital of the Second World War, a city that had been one of the great urban centers of Asia, reduced in 29 days to rubble and grief. The rebuilding of Manila was incomplete in ways still visible today. The pre-war Manila, the Pearl of the Orient, was never fully restored. What was rebuilt was a different city on the same ground. The old Manila now exists in photographs and in the testimony of people who were there before February 1945. MacArthur wept when he walked through the ruins after the battle. He had known the city before the war. He had lived there. He understood what had been lost. He said that the Philippines had paid a terrible price for its liberation. He said it quietly. He said it once. The Filipinos who survived knew the price in their bones. They buried their dead. They began to rebuild. They carried the memory of those 29 days forward into a national consciousness that still holds that month as one of the defining tragedies of Philippine history. The Battle of Manila deserves to be known, not as a footnote in the Pacific War, not as a chapter in the liberation narrative, as one of the most catastrophic urban battles in the history of the Second World War, and as a testament to the price that civilian populations pay when great powers decide to fight their wars in cities. 100,000 people, 29 days, one city. Remember Manila. Subscribe, hit the like button, and share this with someone who has never heard the full story of what happened in Manila in February 1945. Because 100,000 lives deserve more than a footnote. We are just getting started.